Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Marina Ponti, the director of the UN SDG Action Campaign, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact, Sanda Ojiambo, for a Turning Point dialogue. The COVID-19 pandemic has turned our lives upside down. And through these dialogues, we want to hear from leaders and champions across sectors how we can make 2021 a turning point for people and planet and build together more just and sustainable societies. In other words, how we must turn in a new direction and embrace different ways of living and earning and consuming and producing. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for being with us. We are here today. Yes, thank you. So we are here today to talk about the power and the opportunity of this moment. When we last heard from you at the SDG Action Zone in September, you said that the business of business should no longer be only business, but must and should also involve societal transformation. So in light of this statement, which was quite inspiring, what role do you think business can play in the face of the social current crisis to facilitate societal change?
Great, thank you. And I think that the quote that I gave then still stands. I firmly believe that business should be involved in the business of societal transformation. And I think that over close to the last year, all of us have lived through the COVID pandemic, and we've seen the role that business has played. Business has coordinated very prompt and large-scale responses in terms of vaccine access, vaccine therapeutics. Businesses have shown how we can leverage on technology to deliver beyond health, education, agriculture, e-commerce services. And all of these, to some extent, have kept us going as communities, as countries, and really as the world. So I do firmly believe, as I said, business should be involved in the business of societal transformation. As we know, we're going through a series of interconnected crises. We have COVID for sure, but there's also the climate crisis. And I think we firmly see that human health is also very much linked to planetary health, and we must tackle both. What is inspiring for me and continues to be inspiring is that more and more responsible business leaders are recognizing that we don't have to choose between health and the economy or climate and the economy, but in fact that doing both makes the best business sense. And I think over time, business is really sending strong market signals around innovation, and that business can play a role in issues such as a zero carbon economy and decarbonization. As you know, we're leading up to COP26 later this year, and the UN Global Compact is mobilizing more than 400 companies that are setting science-based targets for reduced emissions. And this is just one example of how business, can really take a firm role in the matter of climate and help we address the climate crisis.
So thank you, Sanda. I think you cover very well the issue about sustainability and climate action, which is very, very central to us. Let me now touch about gender equality, which is also something very important for this turning point. And I just want to ask you, being a former senior executive at Safaricom in Kenya, you have certainly broken several glass ceilings, to get to your position. So I would really like to hear from you about your vision, also from your personal experience, on how to increase the role and numbers of women holding senior position on boards and heading multinational companies.
Yeah, and that is a really, really important question. And I speak both, as a woman leader, and you say one who's had to navigate the business environment. The first thing I would say is that inclusive business settings result in inclusive decisions being made and more inclusive outcomes. It doesn't make sense to make business decisions that are devoid of one gender. So that is my first premise. And then based on that, there's not only a moral argument, but over time, we're beginning to see a very strong business case emerging for gender equality. Businesses that have more gender equality make better decisions, both at the board level, at the management level, and actually are more responsive to customer and consumer needs. So it makes sense. It truly does make sense, and there's data to show that. But what's really important is that, efforts need to be made many steps backwards to be able to have women in leadership. Some of these involve challenging cultural stereotypes around girls' education. It means challenging stereotypes around allowing women to both pursue careers as well as family. It means challenging stereotypes around the types of studies, courses of studies, and the types of jobs and roles that women can play. If you look at a couple of industries, I used to work in technology, there had to be a very firm business leadership decision to make sure that women could enter the company and allow to get themselves skilled in technology to be able to rise as technology leaders. And so there needs to be some very deliberate efforts, probably 10 years back, to create a pipeline of women to be able to rise through the ranks. It's not enough to just say we need women in leadership. We need to create pathways for women to be able to rise through that leadership. At the Global Compact, we have a program called Target Gender Equality, where we're working with over 300 companies in 19 countries to set ambitious targets for women leadership at the top. But we fully recognize we also need to work with companies to be able to create those pathways for women to rise to the top. I just want to say that, in the context of COVID that you started with, this is even more important because, again, data shows us that women have had the most adverse effects, both in the small and medium-sized economies and in other areas because of the impacts of COVID.
Now, thank you, Sanda. I think I really like what you said about stereotype, and also, beyond changing the system and the recruiting strategy, and of course, giving access to women, to join at all levels, the private sector is also important to change the mindset of the culture. So to empower women to feel they can play a different role in their society. So I think, thank you for pointing that out. Let me now ask you a kind of a difficult question. We all call for this turning point, and we know that the business and many leaders want to change the way they produce, the way their supply chain is organized. But how can they do that and transform their system and structure towards the Sustainable Development Goals? But despite the challenges of the financial challenges they now face with the pandemic, job layoff and disruption of supply chain. So how can we have a vision that also take into account the realities?
True, and I have to acknowledge, some businesses simply were not able to ride the COVID-19 pandemic, and we know that many businesses have had to shut down, many millions out of jobs. For those who are able to take the opportunity of this reset, I think that there's some fundamental business principles, and we call them the 10 principles of the Global Compact, that can facilitate that reset. You talked a little bit about the supply chain. Supply chain resilience is absolutely critical. I think we've seen that without a resilient supply chain, business simply ground to a halt. It is very important. What are those principles that can underpin a resilient supply chain? I think the first is really understanding and looking at issues such as human rights and labor rights, making sure that workers are able to have a living wage, able to have a social protection system, making sure that, as far as possible, we're able to cater for those very basic needs of the humans within the supply chain, because without them, your supply chain will not continue. I recall sitting on a forum sometimes in October last year, around the seafaring business. And we spoke about how around the world, there are hundreds of, possibly thousands of seafarers who are unable to dock and take a break simply because seafarers are not seen as essential workers. And this is a pure violation of their human rights. But at the same time, seafarers are very critical for moving goods from one place to another. And that's what I talk about, making sure that you can look at human rights and labor rights in the context of business. Another thing that we must also really look at, I mentioned living wages. I think that is very important. We also need to be able to look at the impact of our businesses in terms of the environment. We've spoken significantly around climate change. For businesses that have the opportunity to reset, how do you reset along a path of green growth, of sustainable growth, such that you minimize your impact on the environment? And the fourth principle that I wanted to talk about was really anti-corruption. Corruption creates so much leakage from the system. At the moment, we're debating the question of vaccine equity. I think that we need systems that are transparent, accountable, and allowing everybody to be able to access vaccines as and when they should. So I think taken all together, principles on human rights, labor rights, the environment, and anti-corruption are some of those that are absolutely critical to future-proofing business to be able to succeed and thrive post the COVID era.
Thank you, Sanda. I think I really like the way you combine, sustainability, but also labor rights and social justice, because I think we should not be choosing, as also business to maybe now there is a lot of talks about sustainability, but if we don't protect the labor rights, we will not get, far. So thank you so much. I think we're getting to the end of the time we have. Let me close with a question about you. You are an inspiration for many, but now we want to know what inspired you, if it's a book or a poem or something that gave you the motivation.
Right, and I'll answer that from two ways. First is I remain inspired by Kofi Annan, who founded the Global Compact just over 20 years ago. He was very clear that business needed to put that human face to the global market. And I think without that vision, the Global Compact would not have come to being. But allow me to also quote something around urgency, because we speak a lot about the urgency of the current moment. And the president of the ADB, Adesina, actually said, we have to be impatient about moving forward. And I think for me, that quote simply underscores the urgency to seize the opportunities that exist to reset and to really shape a sustainable future for business going forward. So impatience and urgency.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanda. So let's close with this, being optimistic, but very impatient. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye.
Thank you.